welcome everyone to Snake Magic. My name is Birch. Tonight we're going to be talking a lot about the magic, the mysteries of the snake. But first, I would like to read you a passage from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which highlights some of the themes that we're going to be seeing throughout tonight's class. So the story begins when King Gilgamesh, after long wandering, comes to learn that not only can he duplicate what Utnapishtim and his wife did to gain immortality, because they took two averse animals in a boat during a big rainstorm and saved them from dying out. Curiously enough, but Gilgamesh was trying to become immortal. First life. Gilgamesh, who is trying to become immortal, cannot even stay awake for 7 days straight. So we're going to start with from an intro and the Epic of Gilgamesh. King Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim said, "Perhaps you think your quest has been in vain, but there is still hope for you yet. There is a plant which grows beneath the sea. It has a thorn like a rose, which will prick your finger should you try to pluck it from the depths. But if you succeed in plunging to the depths to pick this plant and avoid its thorns, you may eat it and live forever." King Gilgamesh accepted this challenge, so Utnapishtim had his sea captain carry King Gilgamesh to the place where the plant of immortality grew beneath the sea. Gilgamesh dived down into the deep water, holding his breath until he found the plant, which looked like a rose with long thorns. He plucked it, pulled it out of the water, and even though his hand was bleeding, he did not let go till he got to the boat. Once on board, he looked at the plant and marveled at it, and he could not believe that this would grant him immortality. And over his long wanderings, he had learned to be cautious. He decided he was not going to eat the plant right away. He would carry it first back to his city, give some of it to the old shepherd who lived by the wall, and see if that old man grew young again. Then he would know that it was safe to eat and that it would work. But when he got to shore, he was very hot and very tired, so he went into a pool of water to bathe. But while he was in the water, a snake came out of the bushes, grabbed the plant, and ate it. And as soon as it was done eating, the snake shed its skin. And from that day on, snakes are immortal by shedding their skins. So this story is at least 4,000 years old. Yeah, next slide. That's slide. This story is at least 4,000 years old. It's the oldest surviving written legend of the snake being described as an immortal creature. But this theme, the idea that the snake can shed its skin when it grows old and become immortal and reborn, it's linked with rebirth, immortality, and ancient wisdom all over the world in many, many different cultures. We see these same themes coming back to us. We can see it in Quetzalcoatl of the Aztecs and the Mayans. We can see it in the healing powers and eventual immortality of Asclepius in the ancient Greek tradition, and with the Nagas of the Hindu faith in India. And snakes can also be monsters. Yodamundr, the world serpent, holds all of Midgard in his coils, and at the end of times, he is destined to kill and be killed by Thor. In Jewish and Christian mythology, we see the snake as a tempter who tempted Eve into eating an apple and cost humanity the chance to live forever in paradise. And some are a little of both, such as the Gorgon of Greek mythology, who is as changeable as any snake, depending on how you look at her story. In this class, we'll be taking a deeper look at snakes in all of these different forms. We'll look at snakes as keepers of underworldly wisdom and sacred guardians, snakes as monsters, and snakes as healers, as keepers of immortality. And once we have studied the lessons that these snakes have to teach us, we will do a little crafting activity to make a snake of our own, which can keep snake magic close to us at all times. Next slide. Now it is time for our first random snake fact of the night. You might have seen a meme like this floating around online. Do venomous snakes swim with their entire bodies above the water, while non-venomous snakes swim below the water? This is partially true. While many venomous snakes, such as copperheads, cottonmouths, and large rattlesnakes, will swim by holding their entire body buoyant above the water, and there are also many non-venomous snakes, like the garter snake, which swim with most of their body below the water and just the head keeping above like a little snorkel. But even the snake species that don't swim below the water might dive below the water to hunt or escape a predator. And swimming below the surface is more common worldwide, whether they're venomous or not. So depending on where you are in the world, if you're in the eastern United States, it's a pretty good rule of thumb, but just about anywhere else, don't assume that just because the snake has, just its little head above the water, that's going to be safe to swim with. It doesn't make it safe to hug the danger noodles.
For example, sea snakes, some of the most venomous snakes, and they swim under.
Precisely, we're going to get to them later in the class too. That's okay. No, but they're a good example of this. Watch out even if they swim underwater. All right, next slide. Snakes have a very ancient reputation all over the world as sacred guardians. They protect the secrets of the earth, the gods, sacred trees, and the gates between the worlds. In this first section of the class, we'll be discussing snakes as sacred guardians, protective spirits, and the motif of the wise serpent. Next slide. Of all the natural predators that humans have known throughout the aeons, few have been as dangerous or as feared as the snake. Snakes can go into trees, on the ground, in the forest, in the caves, in the plains, wherever we are, they can follow us. And with their venomous bite, they can kill even a healthy, full-grown human with a single snap. It might be a surprise then to realize just how often the snake is portrayed as a protector of the sacred, the defender of the spiritual, and the savior of the city. The Gadsden "Don't tread on me" rattlesnake flag, which you can see in this slide here, is a warning of what will happen if the flag bearer is crossed. And yet the person waving it might have no idea they are waving a pagan symbol dating back thousands of years to cultures as diverse as ancient Egyptians, ancient Greeks, ancient Chinese, and the Hindus of India. After all, no matter where you live, good luck getting past a snake that doesn't want to let you get past it. Next slide. So the first snake we're going to meet tonight is called Nehebkau. Nehebkau in the Egyptian pantheon is one of the primeval gods of Egypt. He is a giant snake associated most closely with funeral rites, the sun god Ra, and his duty as the guardian to the gate of the underworld. In a pantheon filled with snakes, some of whom we will meet later in today's class, he stands out as one of the more important snakes. And unlike some, he is more protective than dangerous. In addition to being the guardian of the gate of the underworld, he is one of 42 minor gods who assist Osiris in passing judgment during the weighing of the heart ritual, where the heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, guardian of truth and justice, to see how burdened it was by crimes and lies committed during life. If it were lighter than the feather, then the soul is free to go on to the afterlife with Osiris. Because of these dual associations with both this ritual and guarding the gates of the underworld, the Nehebkau was most often worshipped during Egyptian funerary rites. While he may be a protector, he is also an extremely dangerous enemy. He is capable of devouring the souls in the afterlife, but if he is your ally, he is a great friend with tremendous powers to protect and defend. It is said that after swallowing 7 cobras, Nehebital could not be harmed by magic, fire, or water. His parentage is uncertain. Most accounts say his mother was Renenutet, the snake-headed goddess of the harvest, but others say he was a child of Ra, or that he sprang directly out of the earth. Next slide. Next, we are going to meet Erechtheus. There was a story in Athens that one of the ancient kings, instead of dying, had been transformed by a snake. Erechtheus had been raised by Athena, and when he died, she turned him into a snake. He lived in a temple called the Erechtheion, pictured there, and he had a pretty good life there for a snake. Unlike most snakes, he had a sweet tooth, and his favorite food were the honey cakes that the priest would lay out for him in this temple that he ate every day. According to Herodotus, in his histories, before the Persian army came to Athens, the snake did not come out to accept his cake. The priest, who saw from this omen that Athena had withdrawn both her protection and her snake from the city, urged the citizens to flee, which allowed them to then regroup and defeat the Persians on the water. And when they were able to return to their city, the snake came back out and kept eating his cakes. Erechtheus, at least, had a happy ending, which is more than can be said for many other snakes in Greek mythology. Python, next slide. Yeah. Python, child of Gaia, and inheritor of all her wisdom, met a much more unfortunate end. The origins of his name are unclear, possibly from Pytho, the rotting one, which would be a rather circular name since it also refers to his corpse rotting beneath the site of the Delphi oracle. I personally prefer the possibility that it means enlightened one or learned one, which is a reference to the wisdom he gained from his mother, Gaia, and shared with the world through her priestess at the Delphic oracle. However, according to legend, Python was the largest of all snakes and a child of Gaia before the Olympians were born, but he was not one of the Titans. He lived in a cave near the future site of the city of Delphi and had a priestess called the Pythia, who revealed his oracular visions and those of Gaia to the world. However, when Apollo, god of healing and arrows and the sun, was a baby, he slew Python with his arrows. Python's grave then became the site of the Oracle of Delphi, the most vital of all the Greek oracle sites, and the one best known for its phrase, know thyself. After Python's death, Apollo claimed the Pythia as his own prophet, and the high priestess became the priestess of Apollo and not Gaia. However, despite the change of deity, her serpentine wisdom continued to guide kings, emperors, and other travelers who came from far and wide to learn what the oracle would say about them and their endeavors. It appears over and over in Greek myths and Greek history. Herodotus, Oedipus, Plutarch's Lives, and Plutarch was once one of the priests who served at the Oracle of Delphi. And he gives us many examples. For instance, she once warned the Spartans, love of money and nothing else will ruin Sparta. And sure enough, the money that flowed into Sparta at the end of the Peloponnesian War was one of the main causes of the downfall of the Spartan society that we know from classical Greece. Another time, the Spartans were told to pray to the winds. They will prove to be mighty allies of Greece. And sure enough, the storm that came up at Cape Artemisium during the Persian War was what ultimately allowed the Greek army to overthrow the Persians and send them back to Persia. And I thought this one was interesting. They really knew their snakes well at Delphi. Lysander, king of the Spartans, was warned to beware of also the serpent, earthborn, in craftiness coming behind thee. And sure enough, he was killed by Neocorus, who had a snake painted on his shield, and he was killed from behind. How did the Oracle of Delphi receive this wisdom from Apollo? Many modern thinkers assumed it must be from the vapors issuing from the cracks in the caves at Delphi, which would put the Pythia into a hypnotic trance, and then her warnings would be translated to the oracle seeker by the priest. However, there is another very interesting theory that might have gone along with this, that she would be bitten by a snake, like a kite or a cobra, and then under the influence of the snake bite, she would issue her proclamations. And that could be, again, where the concept of the snake and Delphi were connected with each other. Next slide. And now we come to Ouroboros. If wisdom can be understood as a form of all-encompassing knowledge and understanding, then few symbols of wisdom are as poignant or as perfect as that of the circled serpent. The image of a snake biting its own tail has recurred throughout human societies. The famous Ouroboros, the tail biter, started as an Egyptian symbol, and that's because there's actually an image of this in the tomb of King Tut. From the Egyptians, it passed on to the Greeks, and that's where it gets its name. Ouroboros is a Greek name for this symbol. From the Greeks, it was picked up by the Hermetic order of the alchemists, because they believed that the infinite loop, that circle, was represented the illusion of material relevance, and everything that exists will eventually destroy itself, just as the snake eating its own tail will eventually devour itself. And sometimes you'll see it with an eye in the center. This eye refers to the power of the enlightened mind to pierce that veil of worldly illusion and see beyond the material realm. But this isn't just a European and Egyptian image. Even the serpent god of Central America, Quetzalcoatl, is sometimes depicted biting his own tail. So it's a worldwide image, and it occurs throughout the world because snakes for you. Okay, next slide. Oh, yes, okay. So snakes are often depicted as sacred guardians. And it's actually interesting to me how many times the snake and the tree were put together in this imagery. So I decided to go through a few examples for you here. Starting, of course, with in Norse cosmology, Nidhogg is sometimes depicted as a dragon, sometimes a serpent, curled around the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. And he is constantly devouring at the roots of the world. And this negative serpent imagery, I find a lot of parallels between this image of Nidhogg devouring the world tree and the story of Loki's imprisonment after the death of Balder. The gods chained Loki to a rock, and there was a serpent suspended over him that would drip poison from its fangs onto him, and his wife Sigurd would try and catch the poison in a bowl, but whenever the bowl overflows or she has to carry it out, the poison drips onto him and he screams with pain, and this can cause earthquakes. So these examples from the Norse definitely show how snakes can represent very much the darker side of this magic. What heals you can also kill you, as we're going to come back to a few more times tonight. But in other cultures, the snake takes on a very different attitude towards the tree. Many times they act as amplifying symbols or even guardians of the tree. Go to the next image on the slide. The Celtic tree of life, same side, is often paired with Ouroboros imagery. When the snake is combined with the tree of life, it signifies how the world is constantly being reborn and renewing itself, and that whatever ends will someday come back. So in this sense, the snake can lend its own immortality to the tree. Okay, next slide. And I found fascinating a very similar link between a tree and a snake exists in Mayan cosmology. Serpents are an extremely important part of the Mayan cosmos. They carry the sun, the moon, and other heavenly bodies across the sky. But of all of the Mayan serpents, the vision serpent may be the most important. He is a symbol of rebirth, and he lives on the center axis of the world tree. From this center axis, the vision serpent mediates and opens doors between the mundane and the spirit world. So when someone from the Mayan wants to communicate with their ancestors, for example, the vision serpent can come to them, open its jaws, and the mouth will become the portal to the spirit realm through which the ancestor could be seen and spoken to. So whenever a king or a priest wants to communicate with the gods, the vision serpent will act as that intermediary. Next slide. And now we can go over to India and see another snake in a tree. And this comes from the Buddhist tradition. In Buddhism, a Naga, so a cobra demon, we're going to talk more about them later. A Naga named Mukhalinda saw the Buddha as he was meditating under the Bodhi tree. He could see that it was about to start raining, which might disrupt the meditation that would bring him to enlightenment. So Mukhalinda spread out his hood and sheltered the Buddha for 7 days, keeping him safe and preventing him from getting rained on. And when the Buddha became enlightened, Mukhalinda then transformed back into his human form, long enough to bow to the Buddha, and then return to his underworld kingdom. We'll be talking more about these underworld kingdoms when we talk about the Nagas later on. Next slide. Right, and now moving north of India, we come to the Chinese serpent. And in the Chinese zodiac system, the snake is the 6th animal. According to legend, the years were assigned based on to the animals based on where they finished in a great race across a river. The snake, being so clever and wise, knew he was never going to be able to beat a lot of the other animals across this big river. So he coiled himself around the horse's hoof, and right before the hoof and the horse was about to come back on land, he shot off and beat the horse and scared the horse so bad that the snake managed to get 6th place instead. People born in the year of the snake are said to be elusive, intuitive, thoughtful, and secretive. They are intelligent and wise, but tend to say very little and keep their ideas and their activities to themselves. Snake people also like to get material things, but hate shopping. So they'll just hold on to whatever they have and hoard it like a little dragon. Because sometimes the year of the snake is referred to as the year of the little dragon in to soothe the snaky egos. Besides the year, the same 12 animals influence the times of day and the months of the year. The time of the snake is from 9 to 11 a.m., just as the sun is coming up and the snakes are emerging from their holes. And the months of the snake correspond roughly with May and June of the Gregorian calendar, when the snakes emerge in springtime after a cold winter. The same snake behavior and attributes can be found throughout the world, wherever snakes have been acknowledged and worshipped, as we'll see with the Celts shortly. Okay, next slide. Right. Finally, and what is perhaps the most famous Western snake and tree motif, we come to the Garden of Eden in the Judeo-Christian and Islamic origin story. The snake, sometimes Satan, sometimes a snake, or in Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens, a demon by the name of Crawley, went up to Eve, the mother of all the humans, and asked her if she had ever eaten an apple from the tree of wisdom. Eve said no, because if I eat it, I will die. The snake said no, you won't die, but if you do eat it, you will become like God and know the difference between good and evil. Eve chose to eat the apple. As soon as she did, her eyes were opened, and she became aware of herself, a sentient, thinking, complex human being, not just another animal in the Garden of Eden. The ability to know and understand herself was so wonderful, she just had to share it with Adam, who ate the apple too. And then they were both free of that veil of ignorance which had clouded them. Well, that's a snake's way of looking at it. For a magical snake, the accumulation and distribution of knowledge and wisdom is the pinnacle achievement of life. But many theologians in the Christian tradition afterwards were not happy that Eve ate the apple. They put a bad spin on the story and blamed her for humans getting exiled from paradise and have been blaming women for it ever since. Okay, next slide. All right.
We won't complain.
All right, if you're feeling afraid of all these snakes on the table, on the altar, you might have ophidiophobia, the fear of snakes. It is one of the most common human phobias because snakes are one of the few predators that can threaten a primate, and so our fear of snakes has an evolutionary rationale. Ophidiophilia is its opposite. This is the love of and attraction to snakes. So if you see these snakes and you want to just cuddle them and be like, oh, snaky, you have ophidiophilia. All right, next slide. So the next segment of this class is dedicated to the individual and the divine snake. Here we will be taking a look at monstrous snakes and human snake hybrid deities which have appeared in cultures all over the world. Some of these snakes are as dangerous inside as out. Vicious monsters committed to disorder, destruction, and death. Others are more complex, dangerous to cross, but capable of doing good deeds as well as bad ones. They are just a few of the many snake gods and monsters found throughout the world's mythologies, but provide a sample of just how complex this genre can be. Next slide.
Carl. Next slide.
Yep.
All right, so the Midgard serpent. I mentioned him earlier. If Thor, child of Jord and the earth goddess, and Odin, the Allfather, protector of Midgard, friend of the common man, the burly, red-haired wielder of Mjolnir, the hammer of the gods had a nemesis, it would be Jormungandr. Jormungandr, the great beast, or the Midgard serpent, is the middle child of Loki's 3 children with the giantess Angerboda. And from his father, he inherited cunning and trickery, and from his mother, he inherited his huge size and endless capacity for wrath and destruction. After he was taken to Asgard with his older brother, Fenris Wolf, and his younger sister, Hela, the gods of Asgard were so frightened by his size and his scariness that Odin threw the poor snake into the ocean. But that could not kill him. He grew, and his hatred of the gods and the world grew with him. Even throughout the Middle Ages, Germans still attributed earthquakes to the Midgard serpent, because as he coiled and tightened his coils around the earth, they would shake and cause earthquakes. There are 3 stories of his encounters with Thor in Norse mythology. One time, Thor was journeying to Utgard with Loki and his cupbearer Thialfi when he joined in a competition of strength. And he was told to go pick up that cat lying by the fire. Well, Thor grabbed the cat, and as cats do, it stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched, but Thor could not lift the cat. That cat was the Midgard serpent, disguised by Utgard Loki into the shape of a little kitty laying by the fire. So whenever you pick up your cat and it just stretches and stretches and stretches, it's not a cat. Another time, when Thor went fishing, he used a huge bull's head as his bait, and Jormungandr took it The two of them fought a valiant battle, like you can see right there in that picture. Two of them fought and fought and fought. But then his fishing companion cut the line and rode the heck out of there. And the Midgard serpent escaped. At Ragnarok, they will have their third and final encounter, when the serpent kills Thor and Thor kills the serpent, and they die together before the world is reborn. Next slide. All right, now we're going to talk about echidnas. And actually, I learned something new from this part too. So the echidna, if you read a lot of the Greek mythology, you come across the echidna. And it's usually described as a creature with the lower body of a snake, especially a viper, and the upper body of a woman. The two most famous echidnas are the mother of Cerberus and the Sphinx. The other one was once claimed Heracles as her mate. And it is possible that they are the same goddess because both came from the same region in what was then Scythia, time these were being written down, near the Black Sea, modern day Ukraine. But they're often depicted differently, so I'll describe both. And in Herodotus style, you can decide what you want to believe. So the first echidna comes into the story very early in Greek mythic prehistory. She was one of the earliest creations of Gaia and mated with Typhon, one of the most dangerous of the ancient beings on Earth. Their children were the Sphinx and Cerberus, the three-headed dog of Hades who had a serpent's tail. She was said to live in a cave that Hesiod described as beneath the secret parts of the holy earth, deep down under hollow rock, far from the deathless gods and mortal men. That she lived in a cave, again, harkens back to this idea that she could be an ancient earth goddess, what otherwise lost to time. What possibly a lot of people suggest is, of course, the Minoan snake goddess, the one that you sometimes see depicted holding two snakes, one in either hand. But one thing is certain, she became strongly associated with rot, forces of death, decay, darkness, putrefaction. By dwelling in dark caves and deep places of the earth, she represents the darker side of earth elemental magic and the earth goddess magic, that which rots and remembers. So if this was a goddess once, only that side of her was remembered and carried on through the Greek legends. And serpent goddesses were very important in this part of the ancient world. Again, Minoan Crete, there's that figurine they found in Knossos of a mother goddess type figure holding two snakes, one in each hand. Unfortunately, we know basically nothing about her except what she looks like, because we still cannot read Linear A, the Minoan writing system. That's still not been deciphered. So if you want to find out, learn to read Linear A tablet. That's what my goals are. But there are many clues throughout the archaeological site, which point tantalizingly to the possibility that this was a very egalitarian society between men and women, and that the goddess was just as important as the god. But we cannot know until we can read whatever they may have written about themselves. Next slide. All right, and so now we come to the Scythian snake goddess. Like I said, it's possible that she and the echidna are the same figure or two very similar figures living in caves in the same area. The Scythians are another example of a society that worshipped the snake goddess and had strong female role models. If you ever hear of the Amazons, they were probably based on stories that reached the Greeks about the Scythian women who would ride on horses and fight alongside their men in battle. So, precisely one story of the Scythian snake goddess has survived to modern times. And that's because Herodotus decided to include it in his chapters on the Scythian people. And the story goes that while Heracles, was coming back from one of his 12 labors, leading the horses of Darien. He went from basically Western Europe to Greece by way of modern day Ukraine for some reason. And on his way back, he suddenly lost the 2 mares who pulled his chariot. And while he was looking for them, he came across a woman who had the lower body of a viper and the upper body of a beautiful woman. And she told him, I have your horses. I will only give them back if you sleep with me.
Okay. Of course.
And Heracles, being Heracles, was like, oh,
Yeah, I was gonna do that anyway.
so he stayed with her for quite some time, and they had 3 children together. The oldest was Agarios, Galenos, and Skydes. And the guys kept not giving them back the horses because, now you got kids, stay with the kids, don't need your horses, blah, blah, blah. So finally, she agreed he could leave. But she asked him, what are you going to leave as a legacy for your children, and what should they do when they grow up? And Heracles took off his belt and one of his bows, and he said, whichever of the 3 can put on the belt and string and fire this bow can inherit your queendom, your kingdom. And the others just have to go off and find their own way in the world. So in true classic fairy tale fashion, after all the 3 boys grew up, the oldest tried, failed. Second oldest tried, failed. The youngest that no one thought was going to make it, succeeded. So Scythes became the ancestor of the Scythians. His older brothers went off into the world and had their own adventures. And he became the ancestor of the Scythian people. What's interesting is that this seems to be Herodotus's take on a local Scythian legend about their goddess founding their people. In classic Greek fashion, the Greeks would hear a story and they would immediately apply their own heroes' names into the story. So this is probably a very ancient Scythian legend that was passed down to us with Greek names. And to this day, since the war broke out in Ukraine, a lot of Ukrainians are using her and the imagery of the Scythians as part of their nationalistic fight against the Russian invaders. Because Ukraine was held under Russian territory for so long that they have to go way back. But they have these examples in their history of, hey, we were once one of the most dangerous fighters in Europe.
Yeah, prove it
Let's
again.
bring it out.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was funny reading about this, because if you remember that one group of Ukrainian soldiers who were basically told the Russians F off,
Yeah.
they were on Snake Island,
Mhm. Yeah. No coincidence.
right? No coincidence at all. And the snake-legged goddess is found in many Scythian burial sites. The picture on the slideshow there is a horse harness. She was often depicted on horse harnesses. Images of her were placed in graves. So she definitely had a connection to them throughout their life. She was with you when you were fighting. She was with you when you died and were returned to her in the earth. So she's a pretty cool goddess.
Mhm.
All right, next slide. All right, we're going to stay in Greece for a little longer, and we're going to talk about the Gorgons, specifically the Gorgon. Who are they? Where do they come from? And what are they? Even the name Gorgon is mysterious. It means the grim ones in ancient Greek, but has no clear parallels in any Indo-European language. The oldest records describe them as an entire family of monsters with snakes in their hair. The story of Athena punishing Medusa for being raped by Poseidon is an even younger story. And then there's an even younger story told oftentimes today that Athena turned Medusa's hair into snakes so she could protect herself. They certainly do make a compelling villain to pit against a hero like Perseus. who can be held up as an example of good Mycenaean soldiery. His name means sacker of cities. And the famous story of Perseus slaying the Gorgon Medusa set up the Gorgons as villains within Greek myth. But the mysterious origins of the Gorgons, again, their name is not found, they're equivalent to any other Indo-European culture. They're unique to Greece. So there is a very interesting theory that these were, again, just as the Minoans and the Scythians had ancient snake goddesses. The indigenous people who lived there before the Greeks came could also have had a snake goddess or snake goddesses. And Perseus could be a cultural memory carried over from when the Greeks came in, sacked their cities, and killed, metaphorically, their gods. And by cutting off the head of the Gorgon Medusa and putting her on Athena's shield, that represents how the Greeks could have co-opted that earlier religion, that earlier goddess figure, attached her to one of their own goddesses, and syncretized the story, but cast the Gorgons as the villains. Because history is written by the victors, as we're going to see over and over again in human history. So by taking this ancient goddess and putting her together with Athena, the Bronze Age Greeks might have been making a statement about their own actions. Okay, next slide. All right, we're now going to move out of Greece and back to Egypt. At dawn and dusk, the sky turns red with the fiery blood of Aapep as the great snake of chaos tries to destroy the sunship. Aapep was a sworn enemy of Ra, the sun god, and mocked order. By some accounts, he is 16 feet long and has a head made out of flint. Long ago, Aapep was an evil god who ruled in Egypt, but then Ra overthrew him and imprisoned him in the underworld. But Aapep was so long, he could encircle the earth and strike from almost anywhere. Remind you of anyone? Every night, Ra and Aapep fight, and the Egyptians would offer up prayers for Ra's victory in the morning. Once a year, Egyptian priests would do a rite of banishing chaos, where Aapep would be burned in effigy to drive his evil chaos from Egypt. Since Aapep lived in the underworld, it was thought that he could devour souls, embarking on their journey to the afterlife. Therefore, spells to defeat Aapep were often buried with the deceased, so they could defend themselves against a snake on their way to go have their hearts weighed and go on to the afterlife. Those same spells were sometimes used by the living as well. And there was a detailed process to dismember Aapep recorded in what's called the Books of Overthrowing Aapep. So they really tried to defeat Aapep.
Okay, on the nose with that one.
The earliest depictions of a snake attacking the sun in Egypt are about 4,000 years old. So this is probably one of the oldest stories in the Egyptian cosmos. By one account, he was born right after Ra and was formed out of his umbilical cord. The Egyptians' prized order and chaos was considered one of the worst things that could happen to a person or society. So no doubt that played a role in demonizing Aapep and encouraging people to create spells and manuals of destruction against him. Next slide. All right, now I promised you that I would talk more about the Nagas. Here they are. These are the Cobra Kings of the underworld in India. The Nagas of Hinduism have also been incorporated into the stories of Buddhism, as we saw earlier with the story of the Naga Mukhalinda, who came out and sheltered the Buddha while he was doing his meditation, and also in Jainism, another Indian religion. Nagas are shapeshifters. They can take the form of a human, of a cobra, or of half human, half cobra with a human head and a cobra body usually. They live in underworld kingdoms and under kingdoms like under lake, under the water. They're very closely associated with the element of water. And they do come to the surface world on occasion and interact with the people and gods that they meet there. Nagas are the descendants of Brahma and the children of Kadru. The story of their birth is also rather interesting. Kadru was granted a boon by her husband, and of all things, she asked to bear 1,000 serpent children. So sure enough, her boon was granted. She gave birth to 1,000 eggs, carefully incubated them in water, and all the snakes are descended from these first 1,000 snakelings, all of our snakes. At first, the Nagas lived on land, but they became so numerous that they were banished to the underworld and undersea kingdom, and under the sea, where they soon built massive palaces and cities, and they're very rich. They have a lot of jewels, gold, and to this day, they are worshipped in ceremonies and rituals often taking place on or in rivers and lakes. One of the biggest is called Naga Pankami. In this ritual, people gather around pools, which are said to lead to these underwater Naga kingdoms, and they can swim or bathe in the water to ask the Snake King's blessing, fertility, and protection from snake bites. But not all Nagas are alike. All of them are immortal, but just like people, they come in different kinds of characters. Some are cowardly, cruel, and unfriendly, while others are noble, generous, and protective. Many also are guardians of sacred treasures. Some are favorites of the gods and are companions to the gods, and some have become heroes and friends of great heroes as well. Okay, next slide. All right, here's some more random snake facts for you guys. To date, there have been 3,868 species of snakes discovered around the world. Snakes can live as high as the Himalayan pit viper does at 16,000 feet above sea level, and as far below the sea as the true sea snakes, the hydrophinae, which live entirely in the water, many of which are highly venomous. So again, do not swim with these danger noodles.
Yep, noodles.
No noodles.
Noodles, yeah.
But they are very cute. Like I really like that banded sea crate that is in that picture.
Mhm.
It is a really cute looking snake, but I will not pet it.
Usually the more beautiful, the more deadly. Yeah, that's what happens, yeah.
Yes. Next slide. All right. So in our final segment of Snake Magic tonight, we'll be looking at snakes as the healer and as those who hold the secrets of immortality. In particular, we'll be looking at the story of Asclepius and how the snake became literally entwined with modern Western medical practices. Asclepius was the son of Apollo, the Greek god of healing. Yeah, next slide. Yes, very good. The deity. So yeah, he was the son of Apollo, the Greek god of healing, and he was supposed to be the ancestor of Hippocrates, who was the originator of what doctors still use, the Hippocratic Oath, I shall do no harm, although I do not think they swear by Apollo anymore. I would, but that's just me. So the deification of Asclepius begins, quite naturally, with a snake. He had been raised by the centaur Shira and learned many healing arts from that great healer and trainer of heroes, but he rose to divine levels of healing abilities with the help of a serpent. One version of the story, the one that I like best, goes that Asclepius found a snake who was on the verge of death. He healed that snake, and the snake was so grateful that he whispered into Asclepius's ear all of his healing secrets, and knowledge. And in that way,
Ah,
I'm sorry.
Okay, I understand.
all right, so Asclepius was able to do what no other healer had done before. He could conquer death. He was especially good at curing snake bites, as shown in the Trojan War story, where Asclepius saves Philoctetes' life after that hero is bitten by a snake. He also learned how to use venom as a curative from Athena, who gifted him Gorgon's blood from the right side of Medusa's body. According to legend, blood from the left side of the Gorgon killed, but blood from the right side could bring a person back from death. In a way, this is an extremely early and symbolic look at how snakebite venom can either kill you or cure you, depending on how it's used. And to this day, there is an Asclepian Snakebite Foundation, which works to treat, prevent, and cure snakebite victims by using the venom of snakes to develop new antivenoms. However, Asclepius was too good as a healer. He brought too many people back from death, and he got Hades and the Fates mad at him.
Yeah, it is.
So because he was stripping the underworld of the souls that it had been promised, Hades got upset. So Zeus struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt, but placed him in the stars as Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer constellation.
oh, that's where he comes from.
Yes, that's where he comes from. Next slide. So there is actually a species of snake called the Asclepian snake in Europe. While he was mortal during his life, Asclepius, after being placed among the stars, was deified into a god of healing. Temples to him were filled with snakes, who were said to impart their healing knowledge to the priests and help cure the sick. These were the very earliest hospitals in the ancient world and provided the medical knowledge that later doctors, such as Galen and Hippocrates, used to create the foundation of modern medical practice. So that's an Asclepian snake in that picture there. He's really cute.
That's a pretty snake.
Okay, next slide. Yep. So snakes on a staff. To find the origins of the snake on a staff imagery, we have to go back even before the Epic of Gilgamesh was first being punched onto clay tablets. To be about 3000 BC or a little later. Basic descriptions get a little fuzzy when we go this far back.
I see the scissors now.
So we're talking about Ningishvida, who was the god of the tree in ancient Mesopotamia. Sumerians closely linked him with snake worship. Interestingly, Ningishvida was the son of the Sumerian god of healing, Ninazu. While his father was a god of medicine, Ningishvida was a god of snakes, fertility, and wisdom, and his symbol was a snake curled around a tree or a stick. Although some academics later argue it's actually a vine, they're trying to link him to Dionysus, but either way, it was a stick and it had a snake around it. The snake had a name. He was called Basmu, and he was a venomous serpent associated with death, rebirth, and fertility in the Sumerian mythology. So from the Mesopotamians, the imagery of a snake curled around a staff spread west, first to Egypt and then to Greece, where we get the examples most recognized in the Western world today. The staff of Asclepius, that's just a single snake. And this is historically the symbol of the medical profession because of its connection to Asclepius. But then there's also the caduceus, which is two snakes. And fun story. So the caduceus was originally, of course, communication, the messenger god, peace because the two snakes stopped fighting. But it became a symbol of medicine in the United States because a doctor in the US Medical Corps in the 19th century decided that they needed to upgrade their symbolism. And he said we should use the caduceus because it's a symbol of medicine. He got his sticks mixed up. But he was only slightly, slightly wrong because the alchemist did kind of use it as immortality back in the 16th century, but it was not a medical staff. However, the American Medical Association goes for a more traditional single snake staff, but the caduceus with the two snakes is used by the U.S. Medical Corps, the Navy Pharmacy Division, and the Public Health Service. But at least the Public Health Service has an excuse because they can say it's for communicating about public health. But yeah, so if you see two snakes on a staff and someone tries to tell you it's medicine, be like, no, that is communication. One snake equals medicine. All right, next slide. So as we talked about at the very beginning of this class, the idea of the snake being immortal because it sheds its skin crops up all over the place. I pulled up 3 examples I found most interesting. In the West African kingdom of Dahomey, there's almost the exact same argument as there is in Gilgamesh, used by the people in this kingdom. In addition to believing that the shedding of their skin makes snakes immortal, they honored Dan, the great serpent that encircles the world and keeps it from splintering apart. So another snake coiled around the entire world. I just think they're seeing a snake curled around the world somehow. Then Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent deity of Central America and the Southwestern United States, also have the power of immortality, and his is cyclical, like the shedding of snake skin. When Quetzalcoatl was banished, please be a person living there, he was banished. He left at the very beach, which will one day become Veracruz, the landing site of Hernan Cortez, the Spanish conquistador. And he said he would come back in a year of the one reed. And Hernan Cortez landed in a one reed year at that beach. So when Montezuma heard of Cortez and heard what was going on, did any wonder he should say, he has appeared, he has come back. He will come back here to the place of his throne and canopy, for that is what he said he would do when he departed. The weird string of coincidences were enough that, there was just enough disarray and confusion that the Aztecs weren't able to fight back in time. And then when the other groups sided with them, with the Spanish against the Aztecs, that was the end of the great Aztec Empire, which at the time had been one of the most powerful in the world.
Cortez just went along with it.
Well, what would you do? But it's just a very weird string of coincidences because Quetzalcoatl was even said to be white-skinned and bearded.
Oh, that's just,
Oh.
yes, there you go.
Confusing.
Give them.
It's elevated being, that's what.
Yeah, right. But yeah, there's a lot of unlikely similarity between Hernan Cortez and Quetzalcoatl, a plumed serpent deity, but somehow it worked out. And we've already brought up Ouroboros once, but in the Middle Ages, this became a symbol of alchemy's most sought after goal, the philosopher's stone, which produces the elixir of life. If you drink the elixir of life, you become immortal. It can cure any wound, restore health and vitality to mind, body, and spirit, transform lead into gold, and of course, then you are immortal. Snakes, as animals, both with the possibility to renew their skin, who are seen as being part of the earth, good at transforming themselves, they were the perfect symbol of the elixir vitae's power. Next slide. All right, now we're gonna move north to the Celts. So the snake is a symbol of many things across many cultures. And the snake of Bridget is no different. Sometimes she can emerge her snake can emerge in spring from the darkness of winter to carry the potential of fertility and rebirth. But there is another Celtic snake goddess known for two sacred snakes which coil around her. A goddess lost and almost forgotten, but for one thing, the story of how she fell from power and worship. Her name was Cora. Cora was a goddess of the earth, a strong deity of healing, death, rebirth, and the ever-giving earth beneath our feet. She had power over life, death, and all the powers of transformation and chaos. And it was her two snakes and Bridget's snakes whom St. Patrick drove from Ireland. When St. Patrick came to the shores of Ireland and sought to stamp out the paganism he found there, the so-called villainy of the pagan practices became monstrous. And around St. Patrick's Day, you'll always see the same kind of memes floating around about St. Patrick and the snakes from Ireland, because there'll always be a rebuttal in these things. It says, there hasn't been a snake in Ireland since the last ice age, so he couldn't have driven the snakes from Ireland. And then somebody would say, it's a symbol of them, the symbol of getting rid of the pagans, driving them from Ireland. He got rid of the pagans. The pagans were the monsters. The pagans were driven from Ireland. But snakes are immortal. They can shed their skin and be reborn. Many years ago, I was reading this book on Celtic Druidism, and I came across a story about this man who was talking to his son about St. Patrick's Day. They were both Irish Druids and pagans. And the son was talking about the snakes and how they were the old Irish pagans who had been driven out of Ireland by St. Patrick. And the father said, we are the snakes, and we are still here. They couldn't drive us out.
Here.
We are the snakes, and we are still here. The snakes are being reborn, as is their power. And many Celtic and Irish pagans, Druids, and other pagans across the world, and from many different traditions, are reclaiming the snake as a sacred symbol, using it as a reaction against the Christianization of St. Patrick's Day. By wearing a snake, you can join in this movement on March 17th. Wear a snake, picture of a snake, hidden among the St. Patrick's Day decorations at work. There just so happens to be a snake right next to my name. No one but me knows what that means. You can join this movement and prove that the snakes are still here and will never be driven out of history. That's the inspiration for the craft we're going to do next. But before we switch, I have one last snake fact for you. Next slide. Titanoboa.
Ooh.
Oh,
This was the largest snake to ever live on Earth.
Yeah.
It lived in South America during the Pleistocene, 60 to 58 million years ago, making it part of the very first generation of large animals after the extinction of the dinosaurs. How big was it? Based on the fossils we've found so far, the average length was 42 feet. At that size, it's estimated Titanoboa weighed about 2,500 pounds.
That's
So to get an idea of just how big this snake is, that's more than twice the length of the largest anaconda and more than most bulls. A school bus tends to be around 35 to 40 feet long. So imagine a snake as long as a school bus that weighs as much as a very, very large bull, and you get the idea. It was a big snake.
You'd be a snack panda.
Snick snack.
You'd swallow this table.
Yeah, swallow the green hall. So as we think about monstrous snakes that are capable of coiling around the entire world, this was a snake that would have probably come pretty damn close. All right, dang close. All right, so now it is time for our crafting. You are gonna make a little snake. And before I move on, does anyone have any questions about snakes?
No, I just, think it's kind of interesting. So, obviously work with Boston, that whole thing with the love peoples of the relationship with that snake and everything. But I find it very interesting that,
Yes.
like, in this particular case, snakes, like it or not, are just amazing predators, right? And the kind of relationship with cats in the sense of you see them and then you see what they can do, but they don't do it often enough. So when they actually do it, it's like, what the crap? Like when a snake shoots out at you and snaps at you, that is like beyond like, wow. Then they had to slow it down. The cats, when I understand, are one of the few animals that actually can match that speed. It's like, how? That thing is
Well,
like,
just ask Logan, wherever Logan is,
That's what I'm
he
saying.
catches me.
yeah, that's a cow.
Chickens too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna be weaving finger snakes. And there's a little rhyme from the fiber magician that we'll be using. Should we just play the video, you think?
Yeah, play the video.
Okay, so there's another
Video.
screen share with a video
Screen.
of how to make a snake weaving, so you can see it in action.
How to finger knit for beginners.
Yeah,
Yeah,
click that and share it.
And then hit play.
Play it
yep.
and you can make it full screen.
My name is Ann Wheel. I write the blog Flats and Twine, where you'll find all sorts of projects and patterns for the modern maker. I also wrote the book Knitting Without Needles, which is all about finger and arm knitting and the fabulous things you can make. And I'm so excited to teach you how to finger knit today.
Is that
First, I'm
correct?
going to put these samples aside because I'm going to share with that with you in a little bit. And first, I just wanted to share some of the fabulous things you can make with finger knitting. So you can end up making things like this fabulous octopus, these adorable little booties,
This was the next one.
a beautiful headband.
Okay, no, well,
These are all finger knit items.
okay.
You also,
Everybody-
when you increase your skills even more, you can attach finger knitting without
Yeah, no,
sewing,
we're
which
like
is
4
while you're
minutes.
finger knitting.
Okay, just pause
This is
this, I'll
fabulous
explain how to
stuff.
finger knit the snake manually.
Okay.
Okay, so. Sorry about that. Video must have jumped ahead because YouTube wanted me to do this myself. It's quite all right. I'll come around here. So people can see. So you start by holding it. Right, by magician, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
holding it like this, right?
Hold it tight in your hand.
So it kind of makes a dash across your palm. Do they have a good view of me online? Okay,
You can sit closer to the camera if you wish.
okay. I just want to make sure also Alva can watch. So then you loop around your fingers, yes?
Mhm.
Okay. And as you loop around the fingers, you say over, because you're going over your finger, over, under, coming on the front side of your finger, over, same thing, under. So now you have the pattern across your fingers, like so. And then you say it again, over. So now you're gonna kind of encase each of your finger, over, under, over, under. Around. And then do it again.
The
Over.
first time you have to do it twice, so you have
Yeah.
two lines of yarn on each finger.
Yep. Okay, so you do it twice, over, under, around, over, under, around, around. So you'll have your fingers like this with 2 things of yarn on each. Keep your fingers close together so your knuckles touch. This will keep your snake from going too wide. Then basically you just gotta
bend your finger down and flip the bottom one over the top.
Yep, flip
Just
bottom over top,
your finger.
then finger. Pull yarn over top and tug on tail.
Tails in your palm of your hand.
Yep, tug on tail. You just keep
Do
doing
that
that.
on every finger.
Yep, do that on every finger.
Go around again and then
So now, after you do that, you have, again, only showing one loop on each finger. Then you do it again. Over, under, around, around. Over, under, right,
over, under, around, around.
Yep.
And then you'll be back in the beginning. And then you pick up the next one.
I think I'm too many on my fingers now. Okay,
Just two. Go back to the, keep going.
yep, over, under, around, around,
There you
okay.
go.
So now you'll have, again, two on each finger. And then you go over, you loop it through again. Loop it through again. Loop it through again. And loop it through again. So you keep doing this. And what you're doing on the back end of your hand is you're making the snake. So you just keep doing this until
You gotta do about 5 or 6 times before you can really see.
Really
that
see the
it's
snake?
becoming a snake.
but you just keep doing it until you start seeing the snake. So what we have here for the project, we have various kinds of yarn. If you don't see a color you like, you can ask Minerva nicely if you go to the temple.
Absolutely.
Scissors, you want what, like good arm's length?
Yeah, well, everybody can get their own ball of yarn.
Yeah, but
And
once you cut it, you want to cut like,
Yeah.
actually, yeah, you can each have a ball of yarn and just keep going.
uh-huh,
And then, just leave the snake once you think you have enough snake like coming out, the backside of your fingers. We'll show you how to tie it off. And then, we have some googly eyes and some glue guns that you can
Okay.
use to make, your own snake.
yeah.
And then you can take these snakes and wear them and keep them around your house and have snake magic all the time.
Mhm.
Nice.
I'll grab some yellow. I'll do it right in front of the camera.
Googly eyes on the phone.
If anyone else wants to make your own snack?
Put it in the palm of your hand and go over, under, around. I gotta do that again. Over, under, around. So you have 2 on each finger. And that's where you bend your finger and put the bottom one over the top one.
Suzette says good night to everybody.
And then you can pull this to snug it up. Keep your fingers together. And you go over, under, around. Again, then you have 2 on each finger. And you go over, and over. Pretty much using your fingers as one of those weaving things. Okay. It gets easier as you go. If it gets too far up your fingers, you push it back down.
It's really quite meditative too.
Mm-hmm. Oops. Tail.
Oh,
I think I'm too tight. Just back and forth and back and forth. come over. Like that. And so in the back, you'll see, let me get the back. You pull the tail tight and you're starting to get this snakiness.
And you just keep going. Eventually you'll get a snake.
Snake will grow.
Better to safety world with.
And in the Viking tent, we were saying, as we were doing this, we were going over, under, around, around, over, under, around. How many passes will it take around to finger knit a fearsome snake?
I love that.
Around. Will he stretch around the earth? Around. Will Odin throw him in the sea? Around. My serpent will be short on girth. Around. Don't worry, Thor, this snake is for me. Around. Until you've got them all intertwined.
Oh, that works too.
And then you can send the last of it through. That's how you, like your crocheting.
So how do you? So I have it like this right now.
Okay, yeah, cut it off.
See, I think she said just put it over each finger. Yeah.
You just take your first thing, take it off your first finger, put it on your. second
Okay, so then
finger,
put it, take off one finger, put it on the next.
And then put,
Starting from which way? From
Yeah,
here?
it goes from there, yeah.
Oh, I see.
put that loop over on that finger and then take the one from behind. And go over it, and then put that loop on the next finger, and the one from underneath and go over it. If you're casting off knitting.
Okay, then you just,
And then that.
Then you just tie a knot.
That one up over. Yeah. Now send the end through like you're just finished with the crochet project.
good.
Wow, that's awesome.
Good at that.
Mhm. Take, just stop it.